While it may not be at the forefront of your mind for the dwindling group of America's nuns, it's a major issue. Simply put, there aren't enough of them, and they're having a hard time convincing younger women to take their vows. What does this mean for the future of the sisterhood?
Think nuns are all prayer and purity? Think again. Behind convent walls, some sisters live double lives that would shock the world. From forbidden romances to cold-blooded crimes, these holy women broke every vow they took. Their stories are wild, twisted, and absolutely true. Ready to meet history's most scandalous nuns? Buckle up, because what you're about to hear will blow your mind. 5. Sister Cécile Bombeek. Sister Cécile Bombeek appeared to be an ordinary Josephite nun when she was assigned to a 38-bed geriatric ward in Wetteren, Belgium in 1977. Born in 1933, she had lived most of her life in religious service and was widely regarded as dependable, disciplined, and compassionate. For years, nothing in her record suggested danger. To colleagues and patients alike, she was simply another caregiver in a quiet institution for the elderly. Yet beneath that calm exterior, something had already begun to fracture. The turning point came in 1976, after Sister Cécile underwent brain surgery. During her recovery, she was prescribed morphine to manage pain. What began as medical treatment soon developed into a powerful addiction. The substance altered her behavior and judgment, eroding the moral and emotional restraints that had once defined her life as a nun. Her dependence deepened rapidly, and with it came a dramatic personal transformation. Sister Cécile began engaging in multiple secret relationships, including affairs with a retired missionary and a local school teacher. These relationships brought emotional turmoil and financial strain, pressures she was ill-equipped to handle on a modest religious income. Desperation followed opportunity, and opportunity came in the form of the vulnerable elderly patients entrusted to her care. Over the course of roughly a year, Sister Cécile She stole their money, forged legal documents, and manipulated them into signing over property and savings. In total, she embezzled an estimated $30,000. These were not wealthy individuals, but frail, dependent people who relied on her for daily care and protection. Her betrayal cut deeply into the trust placed in religious caregivers. Her behavior soon escalated beyond financial exploitation. Witnesses and later investigations revealed that Sister Cécile engaged in acts of deliberate cruelty. She repeatedly tore out patients' catheters, inflicting severe pain and distress. These actions served no medical purpose and appeared to provide her with a disturbing sense of control. The geriatric ward, meant to be a place of dignity and comfort, became a site of suffering. Then the deaths began. Out of the 38 patients in her ward, 21 died during her tenure. The number was far beyond what could be explained by age or illness alone. When authorities finally intervened, Sister Cécile confessed to eliminating 3 patients by administering fatal insulin overdoses. Her explanation was chillingly mundane. She said they were too noisy at night. Investigators suspected the true number of victims was far higher, possibly as many as 30. However, definitive proof remained elusive. In March 1978, Sister Cécile faced additional charges related to prescription forgery and substance misuse. Despite the gravity of her crimes, she never stood trial. Psychiatrists declared her mentally unfit, and she was committed to a psychiatric institution. For the families of the victims, justice never came. The case closed without a courtroom reckoning, leaving behind unanswered questions and a haunting reminder of how absolute trust, once broken, can lead to unimaginable harm. But what happens when an entire institution allows abuse to flourish for decades? 4. St. Joseph's Catholic Orphanage. St. Joseph's Catholic Orphanage in Burlington, Vermont looked like a sanctuary. Opening its doors in the mid-1800s, it served as a home for hundreds of orphaned children over more than a century. Run by the Sisters of Providence, the institution operated at full capacity from 1930 to 1970, before finally closing in 1974. For decades, it maintained a reputation as a place where vulnerable children could find safety. The truth was horrifying. The first crack in the facade appeared in 1993, when a man named Joseph Barquin confided in his wife about scars on his body. She was shocked and demanded an explanation. What Barquin revealed was a childhood of terror at St. Joseph's during the 1950s. Barquin described witnessing a girl thrown down the stairs. She showed signs of severe head trauma afterward. He described being dragged under the stairs himself, where he was forcefully touched. Then, his attackers cut his genitals. These weren't accidents or isolated incidents. They were deliberate acts of cruelty committed by the very nuns entrusted with his care. Barquin attempted to reconcile with the diocese, hoping for acknowledgement and healing. When that failed, he filed a lawsuit with lawyer Philip White. It would take 3 years, but eventually, other voices started coming forward. Sally Dale came forward with her own testimony. She described being forced to eat her own vomit when she became sick. She witnessed a boy pushed out of a window, falling to his death below. She had vague but haunting memories of another boy being drowned in a lake. These weren't nightmares. These were memories of real events that happened within the orphanage walls. Other survivors stepped forward with their stories. One girl had her fingertips burned for the crime of stealing candy. Children were regularly punched by nuns who were supposed to protect them. Some were held against hot radiators until their skin burned. Others were held upside down out of windows, dangling in terror. Children were tied to beds without mattresses and beaten. Even babies weren't safe. Survivors described infants being held underwater or having their mouths covered until they turned blue. The pattern was clear. This wasn't a case of one troubled individual. This was systemic abuse spanning decades, enabled by an institution that prioritized its reputation over children's safety. 3 years after Barquin's initial filing, multiple victims came forward with lawsuits. Barquin's case was settled for an undisclosed amount, and he advocated for other plaintiffs to settle as well, hoping to help them move forward with their lives. In 2018, a BuzzFeed article renewed interest in St. Joseph's and similar institutions. The Burlington Diocese finally acknowledged the abuse had occurred. However, the United States has never opened a national inquiry into the Catholic orphanage system, despite mounting evidence that St. Joseph's was far from unique. Hundreds of children suffered together at St. Joseph's, but one predator found a different approach, isolating a single victim completely. 3. Sister Eileen Shaw. Patricia Cahill was just 16 years old when she confided in someone she thought she could trust. For years, from ages 5 to 13, her uncle had been assaulting her. She finally gathered the courage to tell Sister Eileen Shaw, a nun with the Sisters of Charity in New Jersey. Sister Shaw positioned herself as a mentor, someone who would help Patricia heal from her trauma. Instead, Sister Shaw became another predator. Sister Shaw built trust carefully. She gave Patricia attention, invited her to mass, and taught her to play guitar. To a traumatized teenager desperate for genuine care, these gestures seemed like kindness. Patricia had no way of knowing she was being groomed for abuse. The first assault happened at a shore house. Sister Shaw gave Patricia tea that had been tampered with. Patricia lost consciousness. When she woke up, Sister Shaw had assaulted her. It was a betrayal so profound that Patricia's young mind struggled to process it. The very person she had trusted to help her heal from abuse had become her abuser. The assaults continued at multiple locations: the Xavier Center at Convent Station, a Sisters of Charity retreat, the Glen Rock Convent, where other nuns reportedly witnessed Sister Shaw taking Patricia upstairs, but did nothing to intervene. Sister Shaw used alcohol and tranquilizers to incapacitate the teenager. She took Patricia on trips with other nuns, maintaining the facade of mentorship while continuing the abuse. As Patricia grew older, the abuse didn't stop. Sister Shaw maintained control well into Patricia's adulthood. She discouraged Patricia from dating or forming friendships, isolating her victim to maintain power over her. Patricia responded to the ongoing trauma with harmful coping behaviors involving substances and alcohol, and endured severe emotional distress. The psychological manipulation was methodical. Sister Shaw exploited Patricia's vulnerability, her need for validation, her desperate search for a safe adult. Every act of kindness was calculated. Every moment of attention served a purpose. The guitar lessons, the religious guidance, the trips, all were tools of control, binding Patricia tighter into a web she couldn't see and didn't understand. In 1975, Patricia left her teaching job at St. Cecilia School, where Sister Shaw served as principal. But leaving the school didn't mean escaping the abuse. The cycle of breaking up and reconciling continued for years, with Sister Shaw maintaining psychological control over her victim. The abuse had fundamentally altered Patricia's understanding of trust, safety, and her own worth. It wasn't until the 1990s that Patricia finally recognized what had been done to her as a pattern of abuse. In 1994, she contacted a lawyer. The Sisters of Charity responded swiftly, removing Sister Shaw from her position immediately. She was barred from ministry and from working with anyone under the age of 21. Patricia received a settlement of $70,000, a sum that could never compensate for decades of trauma. But the story didn't end there. In 2004, Patricia discovered Sister Shaw was still working for the Caritas community in Jersey City. despite the restrictions supposedly placed on her. The institution had failed again. By 2019, reports indicated Sister Shaw remained a nun with so-called limited access, but continued to receive support from the church. A victim who sought help from childhood abuse found only more abuse. An institution that promised protection provided a predator access and cover. And even after being caught, the predator faced minimal consequences while the victim carried lifelong scars. Patricia's story is a devastating reminder that evil can wear a habit, that institutions can prioritize their own interests over justice, and that the damage done to children echoes through entire lifetimes. Shaw spent decades manipulating her victim, but some nuns didn't need patience. One murder in Colombia shocked even hardened investigators. 2. Sister Leticia Lopez. In the Candelaria district of Bogotá, Colombia, a nunnery housed women dedicated to religious service. Two nuns with adjacent rooms, Sister Leticia Lopez and Sister Luz Granada, lived side by side. Their proximity masked a hatred that would end in one of the most brutal cases involving a religious figure. Sister Luz Granada stood out in Colombia. She had red hair and blue eyes, uncommon features in the region. But what truly distinguished her was her work. Granada dedicated herself to advocating for local workers in the adult industry and their children. In 1999, dozens of these workers were being taken out by vigilantes, claiming to perform social cleansing. Granada championed their rights and spoke for victims who had no other voice. She saw humanity where others saw only contempt. Sister Lopez despised this work. The hatred festered in the shared halls of the nunnery, growing more toxic with each passing day. To Lopez, Granada's compassion was an affront. Her advocacy was intolerable. The two women lived meters apart, separated by thin walls, while ideological chasms divided them completely. The tension exploded in November 1999, when Sister Granada's body was discovered on a road outside Bogotá. The condition of her remains revealed extreme brutality. Her legs had been removed. She had been shot repeatedly in the head. Her body had been burned. The violence was so severe that it took 5 months and assistance from the FBI to identify the victim. Granada had been declared missing during that time. Her absence, a mystery that would eventually reveal a horror. Investigators turned their attention to the nunnery. What they found was damning. The floors had been repainted and scrubbed with heavy detergent, clear signs of a cleanup attempt. A witness reported seeing Sister Lopez washing blood from Granada's bedding. When questioned, Lopez claimed it was menstrual blood, but the amount and pattern didn't match that explanation. The lie was transparent, desperate. The motive became clear during the investigation. Sister Lopez's hatred of Sister Granada's work with individuals in the adult industry had grown into murderous rage. She couldn't tolerate sharing space with someone who helped people she viewed with contempt. In her mind, Granada's compassion was corruption. Her advocacy was blasphemy, and so Lopez decided that Granada had to die. Sister Lopez was arrested on suspicion of the crime. However, she was released after 17 months when prosecutors determined they didn't have sufficient evidence to guarantee a conviction. It seemed justice might never be served. Lopez walked free while Granada's family mourned, while the women Granada had fought for lost their champion, while a criminal remained unpunished. Then, FBI forensic experts took a closer look at the evidence. They analyzed blood spatter patterns on the wall, reading the violence recorded in crimson arcs. They traced a blood trail from Granada's room to the exit, mapping the path of a body being dragged. They matched pieces of cardboard found with the body to cardboard in Lopez's room, connecting the victim to the culprit through mundane evidence. The forensic evidence built an undeniable picture of what had happened within those sacred walls. In 2002, Sister Leticia Lopez was convicted of ending Sister Luz Granada's life. She received a sentence of 14 years in prison, a punishment that seemed inadequate for the brutality of her crime. Justice came, but it came slowly, and it couldn't undo the loss of a woman who had dedicated her life to helping society's most vulnerable members. Sister Granada died because she showed compassion. Sister Lopez committed crime because she couldn't bear to witness mercy extended to those she deemed unworthy. In a place meant for prayer and service, hatred won a terrible victory. The final case reveals something worse: systematic cruelty spanning continents, touching thousands of lives. 1. Poor Sisters of Nazareth. The Poor Sisters of Nazareth presented themselves as angels of mercy. This Roman Catholic congregation, based in London, England, operated for over a century with Nazareth houses scattered across the United Kingdom, United States, South Africa, Australia, and Ireland. Their stated mission was noble, caring for orphans, abandoned babies, and children accused of petty crimes. The public saw them as providers of safe refuge. Behind closed doors, the Nazareth houses were places of horror and misery. For nearly 100 years, the Poor Sisters of Nazareth operated without serious scrutiny. Then, in 1998, the first allegations surfaced in Scotland. Once the floodgates opened, stories poured out from multiple locations spanning decades. In Scotland, at houses in Aberdeen and Glasgow, dozens of former residents came forward. They described everything from routine beatings to targeted mistreatment. The allegations weren't isolated complaints. They represented a pattern. In Queensland, Australia, a report detailed a 90-year period of abuse that finally ended in 1976. Children in these institutions faced regular physical mistreatment. The specific acts described were medieval in their cruelty. Children had their legs burned with hot pokers. Ingrown nails were pulled out with pliers. They were scalded with hot water. Children were locked in dark rooms without bedding, light, or ventilation. Perhaps most damning, police and bureaucrats knew what was happening, but did nothing to stop it. In Middlesbrough, England, Vera Wilshire testified about being beaten so severely, she spent 5 weeks in the infirmary. When her aunt came to visit, the nuns forbade her from telling what had happened. Jane Guerrero described having her hair pulled out and her head banged against walls. Nancy Willoughby, who experienced houses in Carlisle and Newcastle, England, described how beatings were simply normalized. Children were forced to clean and work all day. When they sustained injuries or were beaten, the nuns ignored their suffering. Back in Aberdeen, Scotland, the testimony grew even darker. Children were forced to eat their own vomit. They were beaten or humiliated for bedwetting. They faced regular mistreatment of both a physical and intimate nature. Siblings were deliberately separated to break family bonds. Joseph Curry's case from 1967 particularly stood out. He was targeted by a volunteer at the institution. In 2003, Curry returned with officials and found a note he had hidden 26 years earlier, proving his allegations were contemporaneous, not fabricated memories. He had confessed what was happening to Archbishop Mario Conti during visits to the home. No action was ever taken. 2 nuns became particularly notorious among survivors. Sister Alfonso used her fists to punch children and pull their hair. In 2000, she was convicted of 4 charges of unnatural treatment of children. Despite the conviction, she faced no imprisonment due to her age. The court merely admonished her and advised her to take a holiday. Sister Kevin's crimes were even more severe. She assaulted 8-year-old Helen Holland with implements. Holland was also targeted by a priest from 1966 to 1969 and became pregnant as a result. The nuns attempted to force a miscarriage using horrifying methods. They jumped on her stomach. They put her in a tumble dryer. They tied her to a metal rail outside during a storm. Despite witnesses implicating Sister Kevin, she was never prosecuted for her crimes. The Poor Sisters of Nazareth case represents something beyond individual criminal acts. It reveals systematic institutional failure. For generations, children placed in the care of these nuns faced routine cruelty. The institutions that were supposed to protect them enabled their abusers. The authorities who should have intervened looked the other way. How many children suffered in these houses across multiple countries? How many lives were destroyed by the very people who promised salvation and care? The survivors who finally spoke out ensured that the truth could no longer be hidden behind convent walls and religious authority. These 5 cases share a disturbing pattern. Individuals who took sacred vows meant to embody compassion instead wielded their positions of power to harm the vulnerable. Children, elderly patients, and those seeking help found cruelty where they expected care. Some faced justice, others escaped it entirely, but all left behind lives forever damaged by their betrayal of trust and faith. If these stories moved you or made you think differently about institutional accountability, please subscribe to keep following cases that reveal uncomfortable truths we cannot afford to ignore.